this document. Okay, hi everybody. We are going to go through, this is a lecture basically on chapter 5 in your textbook under legal aspects of health insurance and reimbursement. We're going to take a look at some of these terms. I'm going to give you some guidance about where to find this information in your book and kind of clear up any information of which you might, any questions of which you might have on the reading. Going through here, I'm going to skip the outline and the objectives. Okay, some of these terms. If you have not had law and ethics yet, HIMS 1150 or HIM law and ethics, then you will probably not be familiar with some of these terms, but you will get them again in those classes as well. So just thought I'd let you know that. So that might help you out there. Let me get to chapter 5 I was looking for. Okay, all right, so statutes is really talks about federal and state statutes, and those are, or statutory law. Those are passed by legislative bodies such as Congress and legislature. These laws are then implemented into regulations, and those are guidelines written by administrative agencies such as CMS and such. Case law or common law is based on the court's decision that establishes a precedent or a standard. And there's a lot of case laws out there that they can go back to that says, because of this, we deem this, because it's something that's been a standard or a precedent from before. Okay, so when you see people on like TV, when they say that they're going back to case law established, blah, 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 that's what they mean. This has happened before, this is what has been done, and so it's been a standard set forth, okay? Civil law is a law that classifies as criminal. Civil law deals with the area of law that is not, that does not classify as criminal, okay? So criminal law is actually more along the lines of something of which that you've done to someone else, such as murder, second-degree murder. That's a criminal law, okay? Civil law is a lot of times what we're actually doing in healthcare when we have suits that are brought against physicians and things like that. It is civil law because it's accident-based, that type of thing. It's not criminal because it's not something that they're doing intentionally. Okay, a subpoena is a piece of paper that is actually sent through the courts to mandate that a specific person has to be presented to the court to testify. Okay, a subpoena dues tenem requires document witness to appear at a particular time and place to test. The subpoena dues tenem is the person who brings the records, produces the records to come to court with, okay? A subpoena is used to obtain witness testimony or at a trial, and a disposition is actually just taken with a court recorder and a lawyer present asking them questions. Interrogatory is a document containing lists of questions of which that person has to answer. So a lot of times deposition and interrogatory are kind of done at the same time. A deposition is actually recording their information. An interrogatory is the questions of which they're asked. Okay, QTAM, it's abbreviation in Latin. It means who is well for the king as for himself sues in this matter. It is a provision of the Federal False Claim Act, which allows a private citizens to file a lawsuit in the name of the U.S. government, charge government contractors and other entities. And then we have the Federal Register. The Federal Register is like a newspaper that's either published by paper or if you can look at it online, but it is a published every business day for National Archives and Record Administration. It is available, again, paper form, microfiche, or online. And the Federal Register actually has the information that we need in order to basically create a charge for a specific code. Federal Register is the first place that we look because it has the geographical factor in there. It has the work factor value in there, everything that makes up the RVRVS on how physicians get paid. They take those quantities into consideration, and they have like a standard conversion factor that you multiply at times, and you can come up with a demodal price on a specific code. We don't do this for every code. We do this for every new code. A lot of places will go to the Medicare website instead. And what they'll do is they will find all of those elements to make up an RVRVS, and then they'll do a conversion factor which they deem is relevant for today's date and time, how much money value of which that each unit is worth. And a lot of this, if you don't understand it, you'll get it again later. But bottom line, Federal Register is where we go to create prices for codes, especially new codes that come up that have not been actually rolled out into the workforce to use yet. All right. CMS transmittals contain new and changed Medicare policies or procedures that are to be incorporated into the specific CMS program manual. CMS Quarterly provides updated quarterly information on that same exact information. The CMS Internet Only Manual, IOM, replaces paper-based manuals. We do not get paper-based anymore. Any information that you need to know in relationship to Medicare has to be taken off the CMS website. Okay, that's CMS.gov, I do believe is what it is, and that will be Medicare and Medicaid. If you need to get to your state Medicaid, you would have to go to State of Nebraska Medicaid, and you would have to find that website as well. Medicare administrative contractors are the people who actually send out the guidelines. They actually they are the actual payers for the claims that go to Medicare and are responsible for local contractor or national contractor issues when it comes to obtaining payment for a specific charge if it need be. Okay. We have conditions of participation and conditional for coverage, CFFC. They are requirements of health organizations in order to begin the continuing participation of the Medicare Medicaid program. Okay. Deeming is another word that's out there too. It's not on this list, but deeming requires the standards meet and exceed the COP and CFC requirements. Now, condition of participation, the COP, you're going to find that everywhere. You can find that on a lot of websites that actually is for their membership, that they can go out there and find news and articles and information for participants on how they are handling things. Okay. So it's not just Medicare. A lot of places have COPs. Okay. Let's see. CMS transmittal, CMS quarterly program updates, internet only. Okay. Medicare administrative contracts, MAC. Okay. So I think we've covered a lot of these. Okay. This timeline of which that's on this slide here can actually be found on page 129. It's very large. It goes quite a few pages here of the things that have actually happened throughout the course of when this all began, which was in 1862. If you see, is the first date, and from there exceeds it continues to page 136. Okay, record retention. Record retention is how long do you keep a medical record if a patient is deceased? How long do you keep a medical record before you archive it? Okay, so those are type of things that you need to look at. The storage and retention. When I worked in the clinic, a lot of times outpatient clinic, a lot of times people wouldn't come for 4 years. Okay, and that could be a number of things. That could be an issue where they moved, okay, or they switched physicians, and if they switch physicians, they're not coming in anymore, but you don't know that because maybe they didn't send you any information. So what do you do with these documents if you have to archive them? Well, we were paper copy or we were paper charts. We'd put them in boxes and we'd store them and we label them and we put the year on it so that therefore we could go back, we could actually find it if we need to. Okay. Filing space was very limited when it came to paper charts, and we were always using up space, and we'd have to keep archiving because it seemed like we just didn't have enough storage space. Today, a lot of clinics probably still have those charts, those paper charts that they're relying on right now until they get archived or they're 7 years out or whatever the state statute is. Now, because everything, they should be going electronic now. They should have been on board with electronic for at least 2 years. So they're still going to be having those paper charts till the state or federal mandate occurs, and they can actually take the process to find a way to deplete them. Now, storage and documentation for established period of time, that is justifiable by the state and federal law. So it depends. Whoever's law is the most longest in time is the one you go with. So if the state law says 5 years, but federal says 6, then you go with the 6 years, then you go with 6, okay, for the federal. So it is all dependent on your state versus your federal. Whichever is the longest, then that's what you have to do, okay? The purpose is to ensure the availability of records for use by government agencies and other third-party payers. Medicare, COP, and HIPAA mandates retention of records. So that is actually in the HIPAA standards, if you want to go look at it. And the privacy, HIPAA privacy, that is one of those things that is in there. And it states exactly what you have to do in order to deplete those records, or what steps you have to take in order to get those records to the proper place for storage. Now, the reason why we have to keep these on record is because of suit, okay? So something happens and a lawsuit is created, you have to be able to get to those records to produce those records, because that is the legal document. So how you do that is dependent strictly on you, as long as you can get to those records, okay? So this is really vital, because if it's a case of a patient who is a child, a lot of times there's a statute of limitation where you can go to the year of 18 plus 2 years or so after that, depending on what federal and state law says. So you have to keep those records for quite a long period of time before you can actually do something with them. Compliance program guidelines. Now, compliance programs are really important. There's fraudulent billing happens. It's happened a lot in history. There's been a lot of fines. The Office of Inspector General is really on top of this fraudulent billing claim issue. We've been in a lull right now because of electronic health records, trying to get everybody up and going. But they're going to come back and they're going to start looking again. And they're going to start looking to see if we're charging the right level of care, if all procedures have been done, if people are getting billed for things that didn't happen, that type of thing. So it helps providers to avoid erroneous and fraudulent claims when you have a compliance program. It ensures that claims are true and accurate because you are doing audits on them, and you're hiring people that are CPCs that are actually certified, that can go in and they know what they're looking for and they know how to code. Minimize billing mistakes, expedite optimizing payments of claims. Obviously, if it's coded right, it goes in right, it's going to get paid right, okay? If it's not coded right and it doesn't go in right, then what happens is it gets denied, and then you have to go back and you have to fix it. You only have X amount of time with a lot of payers to get that right. So it could be 90 days. So if you don't follow up and get it fixed within 90 days, you may not get paid and you might have to write it off. So you have to be very, very vigilant on checking your accounts receivable to make sure that you're keeping up with your denials. Minimizing billing mistakes. Avoid conflict with self-referrals and anti-kickback statutes. Now, read carefully about Stark 1 and Stark 2, about the anti-kickbacks. These are all because sometimes physicians decide to buy labs, okay, or things of that sort. Labs, or it could be radiology consultants, where they have ownership in those facilities and they're only sending their patients there. That's a kickback, because they're getting money twice, okay? If they own their own machine and they can do it in the office, that is totally appropriate. But if they don't, they need to remember that they cannot take any kind of self-referral or self-kickback in any way, shape, or form, because it's against the law, okay? Medicare Integrity Program, review claims for services, procedures that are medically necessary and reasonable. Okay. A lot of things that they're getting dinged on right now are procedures of which that are not needed. A prime example is the child goes in for a sports physical, and normally a sports physical just requires you to do an exam from head to foot, that type of thing. No testing is involved. Okay. But if you hear, example is you find an indication, or you find such as the patient may have a heart murmur. Okay, so you're not signing off on that thing until the person or the child gets an EKG, a chest film, and an ultrasound. Okay. You call the parents and you tell them that. Okay. Well, standard norm in most practices with cardiology physicians is EKG or chest film is totally appropriate. Ultrasound is overkill. That's way too much to be done at a short period of time. They need to go to a specialist to get it confirmed. There's a number of different types of murmurs, and there's still murmurs, innocent murmurs, things of that sort that are not a problem or a risk. And doing an ultrasound that costs basically about $1,000 plus is over the top. So utilizing those services when not needed is very important. That's called medical necessity. Is it necessary to have it done? Or by chance, can you just find out with these two tests? Okay, Medicare administrative contractors, audit claims, and impose correct actions. So in this case, if this was a Medicare patient that came in with a heart murmur and they ordered an EKG, chest film, and ultrasound, Medicare may come back and say, we're not paying for that ultrasound. That was over the top. We need you to determine what send them to the cardiologist to determine and read that EKG and chest film to determine whether or not this is needed. Okay, that's just an example off the top. Another one is we had a problem with, and this could come up with Medicare too, people with epilepsy, and they're totally controlled on medication, not having a problem, and physicians are requiring them to maybe get an EEG done once a year. Okay, Medicare's kind of frowning on that, and so is Medicaid, because if that patient is actually stable, why are we needing to do these EEGs and things like that if everything is under control? So those are things that they're kind of looking at. Do these tests need to be done, or is it something that is doing it as an overkill that doesn't need it? Now, most cases, patients don't know. They don't know whether or not it's overkill or not. They put their total trust into the physician of which they're seeing, and that's totally appropriate. But sometimes we have to look at the big picture about how much is costing people and what is really vital and important here. Medicaid Integrity Program mandates by Deficit Production Act of 2005 to combat from waste and abuse. So that again talks about the abuse of using too much services and the waste of it. MAC audit claims identify overpayments and provide education about programs, integrity, and quality of care. Now, MAC again is the Medicare payer. Okay, that is something that goes up for contract every so often, and there's bids that put out on it, and then specific companies will win the bid. So that is something that may change throughout the course of while you're working, that the MACs could change vendors. Okay. Recovery Audit Program mandates by MMA to find a correct improvement Medicare payments. They're looking for overpayments and underpayments. Now, these are basically Office of Inspector General looking for ways of which that they have paid Medicare payments in overpayment, paid it twice. They shouldn't have paid it twice. They only should have paid it once. Underpayment, they didn't pay enough. So they're going to look at those things. And then this tells us the regions of which that the RAC audit program exists. This is based on the reps in different regions. There is actually 5 regions for the MAC, and then that includes the RAC audits. Okay. Healthcare Fraud Prevention and Enforcement Action Team, HEAT. Joint efforts between DHHS, Department of Health and Human Services, and the Department of Justice to fight healthcare by increasing coordination, enhancing intelligence sharing and training among investigator agents, prosecutors, analysts, and policymakers. Established Medicare Strike Force Team. Medicare has a savings program. It's a shared savings program. It's there to improve the quality of patient care and reduce unnecessary costs. It promotes patient care accountability, requires coordination care of services, and encourages investment in infrastructure and redesign of care processes. NCCI edits. Now, this is information that we are actually going to look at a number of times throughout your program to talk about, and we get into coding, we'll talk about NCCI edits too. When we get into the prep course, you're going to talk about NCCI edits. And this is actually created by Medicare, and it's a great thing. It's a software system that is implemented or enhanced into your coding system and software that it can tell you if you're unbundling a specific service of care. Okay, or if maybe you need to put a modifier on something, or you might need to use this code versus this code. So this really helps to actually help with the process of doing clean claims where the charges are correct versus inappropriate coding. So it helps us to not be fraudulent when we code. Okay. HIPAA, this is just a slide representing HIPAA. We have healthcare access and portability and renewability. We have preventing healthcare fraud and abuse, administrative simplifications, medical liability reform. We have privacy, security, and electronic data exchange or interchange. So this is really neat because under EDI for electronic data interchange, it actually goes down to ICD-10, CM, PCS, CPT, HCPCS level 2, all the code sets. Plus there's some other ones in there too as well. And it also talks about the UBL4 flat file, which is the hospital claim. We got transactions that are under EDI 2. That's also covered under there, which is claims, payments, and referrals. And identifiers such as HPID, NPI, and EINs, which those are actually specific, unique numbers that coordinate, such as an NPI is a number that coordinates that doctor. It's the only number that correlates his name to that number. No one else can use it. Okay, so that's kind of where it all lays out there. Those are the most important ones that we talk about right now, is the electronic data exchange and the exchanging of all of those code sets and the payment process. Because the way it works is you come in the door, you're seen, codes are established, it goes into the system. Clearinghouse gets it, they speed it over to the insurance carrier. The insurance carrier either pays it or denies it, and then the pay comes back to you, or the payment comes back to you in transaction form via electronic data exchange. Okay, so those are really important. Easy in, easy out, comes right back to you. You get paid, reimbursed, and boom, it's gone. They pay you based on those NPI numbers, those identifiers. That's how they know it's your physician. That's how they know who they're supposed to pay. And that information is on the claim form as well. Okay. And this claim talks about the Title I, Title II, we talked about those. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about examples of fraud and abuse. So fraud, accepting, soliciting bribes, kickbacks, and rebates. Now, pharmacies used to do it, pharmaceutical reps used to do this all the time. Send physician on trips, and if they did a presentation for them, they would let them play golf for free. They would give them gifts and things like that. That's all been taken away now. Those days are gone. They've been gone for a long time. Now they can still give you example of lunch if you're in a teaching institution for your residents and things like that, if they're there to teach them on a pharmaceutical drug. Okay, then they can do that. It's an in-service, they can do that, and that's okay. The next one is altering claims to increase reimbursement. Now that means, okay, you might have seen a patient for a common cold, but you billed them as a high-risk patient, okay, which is a whole different level of care, and that would increase reimbursement. So a cough might give you $100, but if you code it as a high risk patient and you code it at the highest level possible for outpatient clinic and you get $300 instead, you're making a $200 profit when you're not supposed to be, because that level of risk wasn't there. Okay. Billing for services or supplies not provided. Prime example, billing out glucose test strips to a patient who's deceased. Okay. It's been done. People have gotten caught. And that is fraud. Abuse is billing non-covered services as covered services. Now, here's a primary indication, primary care physician going in, well check. Okay. And mother says she wants you to bill it as patient has a cold. So therefore the insurance will cover it because they don't cover well checks. Okay. That would be abuse. That would be abuse because billing for non-covered services at a covered service. Okay. Billing or claim processing errors. Okay. Primary example is, are you abusing it? Are you doing it a lot? Okay. Are you abusing the system? Billing or claims processing errors. Duplicative charges on a claim. Instead of billing for one office visit, you bill for two. Obviously, you're not going to get paid for that because they're only going to bill one a day anyway. They're only going to pay for one. But two lab draws. Okay, one of them's not going to get paid, or if they pay them both, then you got a problem because then it is a abuse, and they'll come back and get you. Okay, HIPAA level 2 administrative simplification. Level 2 has to do with standardized interchange of electronic data to administer financial transactions. Basically, bottom line, because of HIPAA and because of this transaction rule in Title II, we can submit the claims electronically, and we can submit medical records if needed in order to get a claim paid. That's all covered in the administrative simplification and the electronic exchange. Okay. Establish significant financial penalties for violations and the unique identifiers again, such as that MPI number of the physician. That's his strict own number. Okay. Healthcare transactions can be uniform language for electronic data interchange, process of sending data from one party to another. And the format is involved too as well. That's kind of like, you know how you format in a font. Same thing applies here. They have to put in a specific flat format in order for it to go through and actually get to the other side of where the insurance company is, and then they'll reformat it again to pay it. Okay. Data sets for EDI. Again, we told you the ICD-10s, CPT, HCPCS, that type of thing. Privacy rule protects the individual medical record of the person's health information. We just think HIPAA is just all privacy, but it's so much more. It's electronic exchange of information. There's so much more here. There is some privacy violation penalties, and it depends on how many times it happened, how much per person times X amount. So minimum of $100 per person per civil violation, not to exceed $25,000 per repeat violation. More serious criminal violations are subject to more severe penalties, $50,000 and or up to 1 year in prison for knowing, obtaining, and disclosing PHI. So if by chance you knowingly let the medical information out and you weren't supposed to, then you can get penalized big time for doing that. Okay. Security rule, protecting electronic health information that is collected, maintained, and used and transmitted. Now, the security rule implies that has to do with ID and access, keeping a lockdown on that porthole, on the patient portholes, that type of thing, doing backdoor audits to determine if an employee is snooping on a patient's chart, that type of thing. If it's not patient oriented, you should not be looking. If you are not taking care of that patient or you're not in their care, you should not be looking at their records. Okay. Release of information requires the patient to sign authorization to release information, and it has to be explicit on what information that they want released. Requests must be processed within HIPAA mandated 60-day time limit. That means that when it hits the hospital or their HIM department, they have 60 days to get that turned around. okay? They have to have a stamped process coming in, stamp process going out. Whatever they're doing, either manual or electronic, they need to have that log so they can determine what was sent to whom at what time. Okay, release of information log must be maintained to document patient information to release of authorization requesters. All right, Title III section of HIPAA, tax-related health provisions, Medicare savings accounts are in there, deduction of self-employed health insurance, long-term care services and contracts, treatment of accelerated death benefits, state insurance pools, IRA, reputations to the unemployed, organization donation, income tax purposes, and things like that. Title IV under HIPAA, application enforcement of group health plan requirements. And then 5 is revenue offset. Okay, and then that's it for chapter 5. So I'm going to buzz through here really quickly and see if there's anything that I need to cover besides that. The patient health information is really important. That the PHI that we just talked about, when you're going to use it as an example, or if people are using it as an example, every unique identifier of that patient needs to be scrubbed out of that note. Now you can do it for teaching purposes, but you need to get rid of their age, their name, any phone numbers, addresses, anything like that that can identify that patient. Okay, so when we give examples of op notes and things like that, in order to help for billing purposes or for coding purposes, we have to remember to scrub it when we're using it for teaching issues, okay? To take that information out, because that is part of the Patient Privacy Confidentiality Act. Okay, I do want you to take a really good look at page 157 on the HITECH Act, because we did not go over that, and that's important information. And there's information in here on identity theft. Now, there isn't a whole lot of laws when it comes to identity theft, because of the fact that, number one, it's new. If your identity has been breached or it has been hacked, and for example, somebody comes in and uses your insurance card and it's not you, and that record is put on your record, the best you can do is do your due diligence, call the physician office and tell them, hey, my account's been hacked, somebody used my card, this is not my record, and so therefore that they can actually take that record and put it somewhere in the chart where it's not visible to when you're being treated, something. It cannot be deleted, but it needs to be noted or marked somewhere that this is an issue with identity theft, that it's not your record. Now, again, you'd have to call the insurance company, because again, if they paid for that service and it wasn't supposed to be, they should be trying to recoup that money as well. If you can prove that it's not yours, then the hospital can't charge you for that either. So that's another thing you have to look at too, okay? Confidentiality and the internet. Let's see what else we got. We did all those. Okay, I think that's it. So hopefully that helps a little bit on explaining for the health insurance and reimbursement for the legal aspects for this week. And again, the due date for this week will be actually December 24th, which will be Christmas Eve. So try to get your homework done quickly so you don't have to worry about trying to get your homework in on Christmas Eve night, okay? The next due date after that will be January 4th, okay? And you will have another module due, and I will be doing another video on that too. I do believe it's probably chapter 6, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, have a wonderful Christmas, and I hope this helped. Thanks.